everyone. I'm Afton Brazzoni. This is the Changemaker Conversations interview series. I'm excited to be here this week with Meghan J. Ward. I've actually known Meghan and have, been following her work for many, many years, and finally getting the opportunity to sit down and chat with her about some of the things she's up to. So Meghan is an outdoor travel and adventure writer living in Banff, Alberta. I actually used to work in Banff. It's a stunning part of the world, so she's certainly very lucky to be based there. She's also a fellow of the Royal Canadian Geographical Society. Now, Meghan has a ton of interesting things going on, so I'm actually just going to hand it over right to her. And just, Meghan, if you could start off by telling everyone a little bit about yourself and about what you do.
Sure. Well, thanks also for having me here. It's been really exciting to be watching your process too, and everything that you're offering to your community. So I've always had a really hard time describing what I do exactly. But in the last little while, I've been actually narrowing it down, so to speak, and kind of focusing a little bit more. But I've always been a writer, and I would say I've been a professional writer since about 2010 when I stopped working for other people in retail jobs and restaurant jobs and just decided to, dive in head first. But before that, I was a writer in terms of just an interest that I had and an ability. And then throughout my career path, I've done a lot of marketing for various businesses, a lot of copywriting for more kind of corporate, the corporate sector. I co-run a photography business here in Banff with my husband, Paul Ziska. So roughly half my time is actually spent helping to run that business and fielding a lot of the new inquiries that come in with regards to what he can provide. So I'm there kind of fielding the new things that come in. Oh, look at that. Spotlight on me. And then I used to be the co-publisher of a regional magazine called the Canadian Rockies Annual that had its really great run. And then the pandemic had other plans for it. And so now I am, really just focusing on Paul's business, but also on my own writing. So that's the kind of actually short version of the story, but that's me.
I love it. You know, I do want to kind of walk through your journey as a writer. Obviously, you've been doing this professionally for over a decade, as you mentioned, and several twists and turns along the way. How would you say that it has evolved? Like, what are maybe some of the biggest moments that stand out to you in the evolution of that journey as a writer?
Right. You know, it's funny because I kind of had to say I was a writer before I really was. It takes a long time, I think, for people who write professionally and actually make money doing it. So, of course, there are many writers out there and many people who call themselves writers. But writer with a capital W to me is, those of us paying our bills with our written work. And so, in that capacity, I think I just started small and it really just lay everything down brick by brick. I had no idea what I was doing. My degree is from Queen's University in drama, a major in drama, and a minor in global development studies. And so I joke that I came out of university highly unemployable. And but in my last year, I had several people encourage me to pursue writing, including two of my professors. And so that told me that maybe I had, a particular ability with writing. And so I literally just started Googling, like, how do you become a freelance writer? And I held a couple of jobs over the years, and gradually I built my portfolio. And I owe it to, a couple of editors early in my career who gave me a chance. And I almost don't know why they did. They could have gone with a much more experienced writer, but no, they, hired me to write some material. I'm talking about Travel Alberta, actually.
Well,
And
that's awesome.
but getting those clips was what I needed to land other work. And so, I just started just putting my name out there more and having more confidence, and wrote a lot for the tourism sector early on. That was my bread and butter while I built up some other freelance work, mostly with magazines. And now I ventured more into the area of book writing, and that's a whole other process. But in a lot of ways, it's the same process that I started small and I nurtured relationships, and I was never too afraid to just take the leap, even though I actually had no idea what I was doing at the time. And so that's kind of the gist of the journey. And so I still do a lot of those things. I still write for the tourism sector. I still write blogs and magazine content. Um, I'm available for hire. I've written for the Washington Post and a variety of other kind of big publications. Uh, and right now I'm working on books. So that's the benefit of being kind of a Jane of all trades, is being able to just kind of dabble in lots of things that come my way.
There's a few things that you said that really resonate for me and that I just want to call back for everybody who's watching. So, starting small, I think that's so smart. I think it's huge. I've spoken to a lot of entrepreneurs on this video series, and I think it really is a long game. People say it, but it's true. Uh, Before I have a guest on, I always look at their website, and and like I've mentioned, I've known of you for a while, and it's like you read these things, I'm like, man, she's so impressive. She's done all these things. And what I think it's important for everybody to remember is that like everyone starts somewhere. You build things up over time, and you plug away at it, and you start small, and it may not always feel like it's happening quickly enough or whatever, but I really want to call to that because I think it speaks to the dedication to the craft, and kind of how that can really 10 years down the road you look back and you're like, oh wow, I actually did really build this craft into something. So I want to call out to that too. Second thing is what you said about nurturing relationships. I think that's incredibly important in any line of business. So yeah, love to hear those aspects of your story. Now, kind of switching gears a little bit here. Obviously, you have been telling stories for quite some time. I have generally, my audience tends to be people either in marketing or in writing, or somebody who runs their own business who may be needing to do these things for themselves.
Mhm.
So, what do you think makes a great story?
This is a great question. Um, I actually spent a little bit of time beforehand thinking through some of these questions a bit more thoroughly. And so I'll be a little bit harsh off the bat here. For me, when it comes to a great story, absolutely nothing can make up for bad writing. And so you can have the best story to tell, and it's so compelling and juicy and unique or whatever it might be. But a good story or a great story poorly told is, to me, just a bad story. And so I think that just speaks to the need to really kind of either brush up on your writing skills or outsource some of that storytelling to people who can do the job for you. Good writing is not in everybody's wheelhouse. We're all good at different things. And that's why there are professional writers and communicators who can help tell those stories. That being said, of course, you can work to really hone those skills and make them better. And every writer can be even a better writer. And so that's just that's the first thing for me that comes to mind. But for me also, a good story just needs to make me feel something. And it can serve a variety of purposes, whether it's inspiration or education or entertainment. There are a variety of purposes that stories can serve. They don't all have to be completely life changing, but mostly I really want to learn something, whether it's about a thing, about the world, about myself. Um, a good story to me, or a great story, is unique, has unique qualities to it, or a unique way that it's being told. And then finally, for me, a great story is one that keeps in mind that the reader is actually the thing that's going to complete the experience. And when text is either too self indulgent or too kind of distance from the reader, it just doesn't speak to me. I've always believed in treating readers as highly intelligent people. And sometimes that means actually understating things, which leaves them room to make their own conclusions or kind of, like I said, complete the story on their end. So that to me is what makes a great story.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I think that's a really insightful point, especially the last point is it's the story itself, but then it's what is outside of the story. And like you said, it's what ties it around, what closes the loop.
Mhm.
So, when it comes to your own writing, and I know that you do some work with others, like people who are sort of honing these skills, is that correct? Yeah. So, what would you say in terms of how you find your own inspiration? What are some things that come to mind for you? And what tips would you maybe offer others who are sort of looking for that inspiration for their own writing?
Right. Um, well, I think of inspiration as two possible things. Well, there's many things, but to categorize it a little bit, there's the topic, and then there's the writing itself. And so, for me, in terms of topics, inspiration often just kind of comes to me. Uh, but I think part of it is I've learned to recognize over the years what a good story is or where the good potential is. It's almost like a sixth sense. Um, and so, sometimes I've come across content and I've been like, oh my goodness, we need to explore this more. And when I was an editor, I would actually assign that to somebody. Like just out of curiosity, it's just following your nose, following your curiosity. Um, and I think it's also because I've got that like radar going all the time, and I'm always open to new ideas. And so I always have my feelers out there for interesting people and topics, or even historic events that maybe have not been told before. And so that's kind of the first part, is just the topic itself. And then when it comes to inspiration for the actual writing, for me, nothing really inspires or educates me more than reading the works of other people and reading the work of other people. And this might be looking at your competition if you're a marketer and just being like, what are they doing there? What's their secret sauce? And really, I was taught early on that if I wanted to write a particular way, I needed to read the work of people who were producing that caliber of writing. And it's very simple that way. It's like homework. And so that goes for both the subjects and the genres that I'm writing in. And so, for instance, I'm working on a travel memoir right now. It's about a 90,000 word manuscript, and in the process, I've actually read about 20 other memoirs that were written in a similar genre or topic. And what that allows me to do is to pick up on things that I like, that I might want to incorporate, things that I'll reshape according to my own style. But it allows me to see what's out there and shows me some of the possibilities, not all, because some of it will come from me. But I think that that's an important step. And so mostly I feel like it's when you're looking for inspiration, you want to kind of read and kind of scan the land for ideas, but mostly make them your own. And that sometimes means not getting trapped in this like imposter syndrome or this inferiority complex, or feeling like you're just copying. You can always take something and make it your own, or make it better, or make it different. And so I think those are the areas that I find most inspire my work.
Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense. I think it's the element of curiosity, and for myself, I come from a journalism background, and it's just the wanting to ask questions, all the questions in the back of your mind, and like you said, wanting to be curious about what else has been written on a topic. And I do think that putting your own stamp, and like not being afraid to maybe put out an idea that hasn't necessarily been discussed in depth because you do want to be original. And sometimes I think the imposter syndrome, it's pretty tough for writers, entrepreneurs, sort of the whole gamut of folks in that realm to overcome. But I think that great things can come from it when you really do push yourself out there and try to see, well, okay, if this is on my mind, maybe it's on somebody else's mind too, and just see how the topic and how the writing resonates with someone else. But it's nice to hear that because I think a lot of people are dealing with these things. So, knowing that those are some things that you would encourage people to try to look past is really helpful for sure. Now, kind of on that note, what are a few simple steps that you would suggest for writers to take to begin really honing those skills?
Hmm. Another good question. And it really depends on the person. Everybody has their own areas that they need to work on. And so I think a process that's very helpful is to actually get some outside feedback. And it might not be something that you do for everything that you do, but I feel like every writer needs an editor. And sometimes you can learn to be your own editor as well. Nothing can ever compare to the professional proofing that, copy editors can do or professional editors can provide. But, let's be realistic. Not every entrepreneur or company has the resources to have a, in-house editor. But there's lots I think that you can do to be aware of your own tendency and mistakes that you tend to make, or like crutches you use with your text, and these kind of habitual things. And so even if it was just getting a sampling of your materials proofed and edited, I think it could be just so incredibly helpful. This winter I was riding a chairlift at a local ski hill, and I found 6 errors on an ad about this big. And, I'm not an average person writing a chairlift editing as I ride, but it just brought to mind, for someone like me, and even for a lot of the public, they see errors like that, and it speaks to a lack of professionalism. And it's not telling the story well. The story becomes not a good story because there's just full on typos and errors in the ad. And so that's just a classic example. But I think no matter what type of writing that you're doing, having some kind of outside feedback at some point is really, really helpful. And then once you know what your tendencies are, then you can look for ways of, overcoming those or changing them. And so for me, I have a particular sentence structure I tend to lean on. It's just the one that comes out really naturally. And I see it coming up in my drafts, like, there it is again. And I'm very aware that this has become a repetitive sentence structure for me, which to the reader, even if it's subconscious, becomes very repetitive. It's like the same sentence sounds like the same sentence over and over just because it's constructed the same way. So my work is now to find creative ways of mixing up those structures so the rhythm isn't too repetitive. Um, so that's the first thing, is to kind of get some insight into your tendencies and then do something about them, and be really conscious and aware while you're writing of those kind of mistakes that keep coming up. Um, the second thing is to use a plugin called Grammarly, which I adore. Um, I'm sure there's similar ones out there, but Grammarly, I believe it's for Chrome, but you can plug it in to Google Docs, to your emails, to social, to everything. And you can also upload texts to Grammarly to be checked. But it's not only checking for typos, it's actually also checking for grammar. And it'll provide you with suggestions that are very easy to fix. And this also helps you become aware of some of your habits over time, and helps you with your email correspondence. It saved my life on some professional email correspondence because it's caught errors when I'm tired and it's the end of my day and I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm so glad I didn't send that. I highly recommend a simple plugin like that. And the third thing for me as a writer is, and I think it comes up for most people that I edit as well. It's to really trim the fat. More is not necessarily more effective, and I think wherever you can use fewer words and more specific words to tell your story, it's better. And so often I'll still just write my first draft the way I would write it, but when I go back to edit, I cut out any unnecessary words. I cut out unnecessary phrases, repetitive sentences, or any tangents that might take away from my central message. And just become really rigorous with the language and choose the exact word that you want to choose. And like the thesaurus.com is like one of the most popular tabs in my browser because I'm always looking for the more specific word, which tends to help cut down on the amount of words you're using. And so this is especially important for digital marketers and anybody working in the online realm where we have a very short amount of time to capture people's interest and to keep it. People are a little bit more forgiving in print, but I think nowadays everybody's busy. And even if they, have the time, we have different ways of like filtering information than we used to. And so I think people are a little bit less tolerant, and we need to be even more aware of that with how many words we're using. So I think those are my top three. I could keep going.
Those are great. And it's funny because everything you were saying, I was like, yes, so glad she's saying this. I'm also that person that sees typos and just cringes. And because a company can have, it's kind of like what you said before, but whether you have a great story or thinking about it from a branding perspective, you may have a great brand, but those things can just so easily distract and detract. So yeah, getting a second set of eyes on things is huge. I like what you said about the tendencies. I'm thinking as you were saying that about some things that I do myself that I definitely try to vary it, try to switch it up. But yeah, those are all fantastic tips. Keeping it short is also a big one. So kind of to wrap up our conversation here, I would love to just, hear about what's next for you. What are you up to? And then also before we sign off, I definitely would love if you could just let everyone know the best ways to connect with you as well.
Sure. What's next? Well, we're really waiting for some things with this thing called a pandemic. It's dramatically affected our lives, all of us, and our business. Our photo business relies doesn't rely, but it's fueled heavily by the tourism industry and the travel industry, and we need to be able to fly again. And so until we can, we've kind of like adjusted and pivoted and running our business fully from here. But on the writing front, I've got a travel memoir in the works. It is going to be published by Rocky Mountain Books next September, and so I'm in the process of editing right now and need to submit it by this October. And then it goes through almost a full year of production and
Wow,
packaging.
that's exciting. That's such a long process. That's super exciting though. Can't wait.
Yeah. And I first started writing that memoir in 2013, 14. And so there's some passages that are been in there for a very long time. And so it's basically about a life lived off the beaten track, in life, love, travel, parenting, and my journey the last 15 years, kind of east to west, hills to mountains, single life to married, and then kid number one, kid number two. And so it takes the reader through that journey of, transitioning as an adventurous spirit to parenthood. Um,
I
and so yeah, it is really exciting. It's also very scary.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, and especially where it's just such a labor of love that you've been working on for such a long time. But it'll be amazing to see it finally published and come to
Mhm.
fruition.
Yeah. That's the only big project that's on the horizon. I'm, of course, aware that I'm submitting that in September, so the wheels are already turning. But I also just released my children's book. I've got a copy here. Um, this is for someone who bought it. But this is my children's book called The Wonders That I Find. and it's illustrated by Tay Odinsky out of Calgary.
Oh, okay,
And
awesome.
so, yeah, it's all about a little girl named Geneva who goes hiking with her parents, and the things that she sees along the trail versus the things that they see, and kind of like how adults perceive the world and how children do.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah,
it's so much more magical through their eyes.
yeah, totally, exactly. And Tay
Oh,
just did
that's
such a great
awesome.
job of capturing her world, and so that is available now, and that's also through Rocky Mountain Books, but it's sold wherever books are sold, basically. And so, yeah, I don't know, like, again, having written in so many different formats, like, I really don't know what's ahead. Who knows? Like, I've had ideas of writing a novel.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the beauty of it, right? Is like you've been able to be involved in so many different things, and yeah, it can take so many exciting turns. So I love that.
Mhm.
Now, what are the best ways for people to kind of keep up with what you're doing and just keep in touch with you?
Sure. My website is meghanjoyward.com. That's where you'll basically find a little bit more about me, and it kind of links out to various things. One of the other ways, I guess, I'm everywhere on social, but Instagram, I'm at Meghan J Ward, same as on Twitter. You'll also find me on Facebook, and so I'm out there. I'm active, and yeah, mainly posting about kind of our life here and our travels and things like that. So yeah, you people are welcome to connect with me however they like.
Great. Well, thank you. Yeah, and I'd highly encourage everyone to do that because Megan, like I will say, she puts out fantastic content and definitely something that I think everyone should really follow. And as we were talking about, like as a writer, just kind of keeping your eyes open to who else is out there and the types of content they put out can be super beneficial to your own practice, I think.
Mhm.
But yeah, thank you. I really wanted to thank you for taking the time to come on today. So appreciate talking with you, Megan.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And I'll be back in 1 month. We are changing our schedule a little bit. So for everyone who's been keeping up with the Changemaker Conversation series, I really, really appreciate it. We will be back in 1 month with our next guest. And on the off weeks, we'll be continuing on with the marketing tips and insights. So keep an eye out for those short videos as well. All right, everyone, take care.
All right, thank you.
Bye bye.